everyone. Welcome back to the Light and Life podcast, conversations on faith and life in downtown Colorado Springs. I'm your host here again, Liza Cunningham, with Pastor Tim.
Hey, Liza.
How's it going?
Good.
What's new?
No, nothing.
Well, if you listened to the last episode, you know that today we're going to be talking about the most inclusive community.
Yes.
I'd like to know a little bit more about why this topic. I know I asked that last time, but this seems interesting to me.
Well, I thought we could talk about inclusivity because we're as a church, we just are finishing this Sunday, as this podcast drops, we're finishing a series on Jonah. Mm-hmm. And I think the main message of that book is that God wants us as his followers to be deeply invested in people that are not of our own sort of kin, that
Right.
that we should care about people that are outside of our own circles. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the things that as Christians, I think people look at us and think that Christianity is exclusive and sort of rejecting of others.
Sure.
And both, I mean, as a pastor and as a scholar and as a historian and as a theologian, it's one of those things it's like, how are we going to take a hit on that? Because the church, the body of Christ, has actually created the most inclusive body, the most inclusive institution or organization in the entire world. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, let's talk that out a little bit, because I'm sure everyone who's listening, if you're a Christian, you've been hit on why are you being so closed-minded or so exclusive or so rejecting. Mm-hmm. And so there might be this is one of those conversations that's worth having, so you can have some understanding about, well, wait a minute, in what way might the church be the most inclusive community that there is? Right.
That's interesting. I had a conversation with one of my roommates yesterday. We went on a little walk, and your sermon on Sunday actually made us think about, just the weight of sin and how the wages of sin is death, right? Yeah. And it's not like, a lightning strike is going to come get you if you tell a white lie or something, which, bearing false witness is not a good thing.
Yeah.
But the way that she positioned sin was so beautiful to me, in that the reason sin is bad and why, the Lord wants more for you is because sin is ultimately going to hurt you. Mm. It's not something that, this...
You broke my rule and now I'm really mad.
Right. It's
yeah.
Oh, I just picture God sometimes shaking his head at me oh, Liza,
yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
But really, sin comes down to hurting us. And I think, especially in the future, you're hurting your future self somehow. And I think when it comes to inclusivity, a lot of people who are hurt by the church and feeling excluded by the church are not understanding of why, a sin is a sin. Mm. And in that regard, they feel excluded because they don't realize the weight of sin, because they don't agree that it is a sin, maybe.
Right.
Is that something?
And they feel a judgment coming out of the Christian community toward them.
When really it's, a love for them and wanting better for them. It's just how do you position that? How do you articulate that to someone who does feel judged?
Yeah. And that's probably not, they're not looking for a fantastic philosophical argument in that space. They're looking for, do you love me? Mm-hmm. Do you care for me? Can I trust that you have my best interests at heart? Mm-hmm. And then you can talk about some of these other things. But yes, I mean, in the arena of sin, I think the model of parenting is always so helpful. I mean, I think it's a God-given model because it helps us to understand how God looks at us. And And of course, a parent is going to correct their child, because a parent knows what the child needs more than the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old knows.
Mm-hmm.
And that cognitive distance between what the parent knows and what the child knows can create a lot of conflict. Like the child wants what the child wants, but the parent knows what's good and what's right and what's best for their future.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be conflict in that. And the child, honestly, is going to look at the parent like, you don't even love me if you don't let me eat this entire bag of Skittles. But but the parent knows better.
Right.
So how much more does God know better? You know, if that amount of distance between someone who's 3 and someone who's 30 creates that much distance,
mm-hmm.
imagine someone who's a creation and someone who is the creator God. And imagine how much distance there must be, and how we have to be trusting of what God, has for us and declares for us as good and right.
Right. But
the church takes a big hit for those things. It's like Christians are exclusive, everybody else is inclusive. The chief value is to be tolerant and to be inclusive, and that's right. I mean, I think people have a tendency to group up, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And be with people that are of the same.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Like I think there's studies even of facial recognition. Like I'm more comfortable with someone whose face looks like my face.
Oh, wow.
And
are you like super uncomfortable with me right now?
I think your face looks like my face, to be honest.
We do have a similar chin
solid
structure.
Chin. Yeah. All right.
High cheekbones.
Yeah.
Right on. Put it here.
Put it here. But ever since I learned that, I was like, ooh, I really want the Lord to work on me on that. Like, I want to be sure when I'm interacting with someone that I'm measuring our relationship and our trust and our heart for one another by other categories than just like, oh, this person looks like me.
Sure.
Because that's what we do. And we're comfortable with our own. We diminish the other. It's part of human behavior. But we know that God is calling us to be more.
Yeah, it's interesting that it could be that all different forms of community tend to make people feel on the outs, because you become a community because you have a similarity, or
right.
It naturally just happens where you form these groups, even like a life group, for example, where people could feel excluded from it, and you might not even know that that's a feeling that other people have.
Right.
But it's all based on like similar interests and just naturally coming together. But I think as Christians, we do have a responsibility to have an eye for the lost, or for the people who don't have a home or don't have a natural community. We want to be includers, but how do we do that without neglecting like our people that are in a direct sphere of influence? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
And we follow a Jesus who told the parable of leaving the 99 sheep to go find the one lost sheep. I mean, going out and bringing in is a huge part of what Jesus wants us to do and be. So I follow and learn from, as much as I can, the thinking of a pastor from New York called Tim Keller. He passed away, but I read as much of him and listen to as much of him as I can. I just think he's so smart about these things. But one of the things that he said is that they say that community is, that Christianity is an exclusive community. And one of the things that he says in answer to that is actually there's no such thing as a community that isn't exclusive in some way. Like if it is a community, it is laying down certain boundary lines and certain sort of markers of whether you're part of that community or you're not part of that community. And so every community is exclusive. Like if you're to an extent, if you're a group of mountain bikers, the people who don't mountain bike are not included, right?
Right.
And so there's no such thing actually as a non-exclusive community. But he makes the argument that Christianity is actually the most inclusive exclusive community,
Okay.
if you can put it that. So every community is exclusive to some degree, but what Christianity does is more inclusive than most communities. So keep thinking about this, all right?
Okay.
So you're living in Colorado Springs, you're living in, as Tim Keller was, in New York City, you're living in America today. And in the water is the idea that religious pluralism is the most inclusive thing, or the most tolerant thing, that just all religions are the same, none of them are true, they are only subjectively helpful, so if that helps you, that's good, and whatever is true for you, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
What Tim Keller points out is that itself is a truth claim. So the claim that all religions are the same and none of them is actually true is itself a faith-based truth claim, if you can follow it.
Yeah.
You make sense.
I'm following.
And that is,
but whoa.
is actually extremely exclusive, because you're excluding anyone who won't say yes to that proposition. You're saying, if you're saying all religions are true, then you're in. But if you say that there is truth and that there is something that is true, then you're excluded.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one who's excluded from that community. Another one that he points out is that good people find God. This idea that, hey, why make it about these particular doctrines or particular teachings or particular person, Jesus? Don't all good people just find God in their own way? And he points out, well, that excludes bad people. What about people who know that they're bad, who know that they are not going to be able to find their way to God, who know that they're lost? You've excluded all of them, which he said, frankly, includes me. You've excluded me because I know myself to be someone who can't find his own way home to God. Mm. So the bottom line of that is Christianity says we're all in the same level of need and brokenness. We all have the same sinfulness, but Jesus died for all, and so all who humble themselves can be saved. There's no exclusion. All who call on the name of the Lord can come in. So that's kind of the argument. I don't know if I did it all that well, but that Christianity is actually the most inclusive, exclusive community.
Have you ever heard the phrase, the ground is level at the cross?
I have.
That's what I think of right now, is it's like this level playing field of everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone has the same opportunity. Everyone has the same amount of love for them.
Yeah.
From God, anyway. Like it from a world that is filled with, sin and illness and evil. Mm-hmm. They might not feel that love or feel subject to earthly love, but from a divine standpoint, everyone has the same
position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you were building a club and you wanted to call it church, and you said, okay, this club, here's how you get into this club. You get your life together a lot better than the people around you. That would be an exclusive community that is totally destructive.
Yeah.
But what the church actually is, what the people of God actually is everyone on even footing at the foot of the cross, and everyone with access to the Savior. Mm-hmm. And that's really radical. Like every other religion, every other philosophy is about, here's the program, run the program, and you can see out in front of you the successful leader who did it right and found nirvana or found success or found enlightenment. And so do what they did and you will get where they got. And out in front of us is Jesus. And where did he get? He got to the cross and he got to the grave. And, even in early times, in early Roman times, there were paintings making fun of Christians. And there's one that very famously that is found, an inscription, a Roman inscription, and and it says, I can't remember the name of the person, but so-and-so worships his God. And it's like this little stick figure kneeling down in front of a crucified man with a donkey's head. And it was just making fun of someone who would worship Jesus, who wound up dead on the cross.
That makes me so mad.
I know, right? Let's get him. But the point is that every other religion had this idea of show me the successful way. Christianity alone says, look, you don't need the successful way. You need the Savior, because every one of us is on the same plane. We're all level at the foot of the cross. We're all sinners, and unless He saves, unless you give your life to Him, then you're not in this. You're not going to be able to build it up and succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody can say yes to Jesus. Anybody can say yes to Jesus, and then they're included.
So how do we, as Christians, approach then someone who feels excluded? Because it would be really challenging, I think, for me to say, well, we're actually the most inclusive, right?
Yeah,
like,
so sit down.
Right. Like, your argument's not valid. You know,
right.
Blow a raspberry at them. Like,
yeah.
I want to be able to express that the people who are concerned about exclusivity, I want to be able to effectively communicate.
Yeah.
You are wanted.
Yeah.
Everyone in here is broken.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no one here is better than you.
Right.
But I don't know the best way to do that without coming off as overly defensive or elitist even. Like, you know,
yeah,
I'm a Christian, I'm the cream of the crop. You know, I don't want to come off that way. So what would you say to someone who...
It's so good. It's so right. Because I think this is kind of an internal thing for us as Christians. It's like, wait a minute.
Good knowledge to have.
Good knowledge to have so that you have confidence to go into a conversation like that and be like, and not like say, wait a minute, you're wrong. We're the most inclusive community there is. Let me argue my way. Let me attack you with argumentation until you cower at my intellectual greatness. But to have in your heart a confidence that, wait a minute, what Jesus builds in His church is really a beautiful and inclusive thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to enter into the story of that. I'm a historian, so I'm always like, I'm excited to read, but that's not going to win the day either. But the ancient, the Roman governors and things, they were really confused about the church in the early days because people gathered up for all kinds of reasons. They, people were in the same guild, they were all carpenters or firefighters or educators or something. They would get in these guilds, or they would get in these society groups, like we're the rich people and we like to get together, and we're the poor people and we like to get together. But Christianity created this gathering of men and women, of people that were from Jewish background and Greek background, and people that were rich and people that were poor. And it made the Roman governors really nervous. So, like, what is the reason why they're getting together?
Uh-huh.
What are they doing? Are they building a revolution, or what's happening?
Right.
And so I like to read that sort of stuff. But more important is to probably translate that and say, you know what? When I go to church, I see this kind of amazing inclusivity. And even at our church, where it feels like we wish our church was more diverse, and we wish that in any particular church, anywhere you go, you wish it was more diverse, because it's growing towards reflecting the kingdom of heaven, and where we're all, all the nations and tribes and peoples are gathered. But if you know your church, the church that you're in, then what you know is people who are at the very top of business and wealth and success, and people who are at the very bottom, and they're sitting right next to each other. I often tell the story, one of the greatest business leaders in our city is almost every Sunday seated one seat away from a man who lives homeless by choice. And that's our church. Like, what other organization in the city would they wind up sitting together week by week,
worshiping the same God.
Worshiping the same God. But there they both sit knowing, I'm a sinner, I'm saved by the love of Jesus, I'm saved by the love of Jesus. And that's beautiful inclusivity. They're brothers because of that.
Wow.
So I think some of it is part of it is like knowing the story of your church too. Like, do you feel like you know people's story in Christian community?
I feel like it depends on how. Okay, I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound crazy, but a few gals and I gathered recently, and we were trying to decipher the difference between social awareness and situational awareness.
Huh.
And they used kind of an analogy of a restaurant, like you and the people around you at a given table in a restaurant setting. That's your social awareness. Like, you can tell jokes to the whole table, but you're not going to scream it to the whole restaurant, which is the situation. Like, you're not.
Okay.
If you were to tell a joke that's socially aware, great.
Yeah.
It would not be socially or situationally aware to scream that same joke to the whole restaurant.
Right.
And so I think with the church, I have social awareness and situational awareness. Like, I know that people of all different backgrounds are here, but I don't know everyone's individual story. I know what the church is trying to accomplish and my part in that. But I also have like direct relationships with several people in the church where like I'm very involved in their day-to-day lives and they're very involved in mine, and it's a joint like discipleship relationship where we're like calling each other higher. And I know that as a church, that's like the greater mission. I'm just not like right in there with every single person. I kind of have to trust that that's what we're all working to do together. And it's a place where new connections can be made. And branch out together.
We were saying before we hit record, how you were asking like, what time do I get home after Sunday? And
right.
I was like, well, I get home like I'm done here around 1:00. But I said, but I wish it was later, because I wish people hung out more.
Right.
And I wish sometimes I call it the linger meter. I wish the linger meter was higher. And part of that is that I want the church to know each other. Like, I want people in Christian community, I want them to know each other more, because something happens with church that people put on their church self, and they come to church showing that church self. But I, as a pastor, I have the privilege of knowing sometimes, like, I look out and say, that person has no idea that they're sitting next to someone who was once in prison. I don't want to alarm anybody.
No.
Because they're a great person now. But it's like, we don't know each other's stories. Like, and you come and you just sit there and like you're preened and looking good and like you're wearing your church stuff but we're sitting next to people who have lost their jobs, have lost their first and their second marriages, have struggled with addiction, have been alcoholic, have recovered alcoholics. And as a pastor, I get the privilege of knowing a lot more of those stories, and I so wish the church would, so that the church could see just how inclusive and how broad the community of faith is.
I think going into Sunday, like a Sunday service, just with that mindset of like, we are all broken, but we're here together, and we're here to pray for one another, to worship together, to uplift one another, is such an encouraging way to go into your week. And it is inclusive. I think it's really hard from an outside perspective to know that or see that or conceptualize it in any way. So that's beautiful, really beautiful.
So I think when you say, how do you talk to your friend, I think you want to ask yourself, what has God done in my life in Christian community, or in church in particular, that would not have happened somewhere else? And it could be so much, right?
Yeah.
But it could be someone that you met and whose story you learned that you're like, never in my 25 years. No, never as a 25-year-old living in Colorado Springs, doing my job, going to the climbing gym, going to whatever.
Right.
Would I have had a conversation like that where I got to know this person, this woman, or this...
On that level.
On that level. And you recognize, oh, God does something in Christian community that is really special. And when we get kind of down in ourselves, or we catch the wind of the critics of Christianity or the Christian faith, and we think, oh yeah, I think church is just about people that are all the same coming together to rally around their sameness and talk about how much better they are than everyone else. You know, you've got to remind yourself of this kind of a conversation, like what's really going on here. God has brought people from totally different walks of life, and they're all saying the same thing, that my life is more ruinous than I ever dared imagine. I am more loved than I ever dared dream, and God is building a community of inclusivity and diversity for His glory, and I'm just a part of it.
Well, that about wraps up our time today. Thank you. And if you guys have anything to chip in, we'd love for you to join in the conversation. As always, thank you so much for listening. But if there's a certain topic you'd like for us to discuss, please email podcast@firstprescos.org. And if you're watching the video version on YouTube, please leave a comment. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode when we discuss working out and God's purposes for our bodies. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
We will drill down on exactly how much protein powder is appropriate for a follower of Jesus.
We're talking macros.
Yes.
We're talking
That's it. We're going to do it.
We're just kidding. We'll see you guys.